If Joker can steal your heart, can he also land a nat 20? Today we're turning every Persona 5 Royal Phantom Thief into a D&D adventurer, and ranking them by popularity along the way. Because after Persona 5 Royal reached over 1 million sales on just the Switch, which didn't include the multiple releases on PlayStation and the Steam store, they wound up doing a popularity poll to figure out which character was the most popular in Persona 5 Royal. So in this video, we're going to go through each one of them from least to most popular and build them as a playable character in Dungeons & Dragons. I'll try not to go crazy in depth with each character, but I will get slightly more in depth as we go along, focusing a bit more attention on the most popular. Because if I went crazy in depth where every single one of these playable characters, yeah, it would take me an insanely long time. And I even got stuck on a particular character and had to call in some backup, but you'll see how that goes when we get there. Let's go ahead and dive in with the 10th most popular playable character from Persona 5 Royal, Haru Okumura, aka Noir, also known as the Beauty Thief. I'm not overly surprised that she's at the bottom of the rankings. She was never my favorite, and I feel like everybody that's played the game seems to make fun of her forehead or her hairstyle, but she is still cute and lovable. We meet her towards the end of the Persona 5 base game, as she is the daughter of one of the targets of the Phantom Thieves, the head of the Okumura Foods company. And it's no surprise that he needed a change of heart, considering he was just focused on his company, and to the point he was even going to be marrying off his daughter because it was further his own business interests, which is crazy, especially since she was still in high school. I can't even imagine being forced into an arranged marriage at that point. But beyond that, she happens to love tending to her garden and even helps the main character of the game in growing plants that can help with their dungeon dives. But as a Phantom Thief, she wields the persona Milady, which can be awakened into Astarte and Lucy. In her Phantom Thief disguise, she usually wields a pretty massive axe and a grenade launcher. So let's figure out how to build her. Starting off with the species, let's go ahead and keep it straightforward and go with a human. This will allow us to choose a skill, and we're going to grab survival, because survival can be part of growing plants, and we'll be able to get the nature skill in a different spot, so I think it works pretty well. When it comes to a background, I was very tempted to go with the noble, because who her father is feels almost like he's a king of some sort, and even her arcana is that of the empress. But because her father runs a massive business that she is destined to take over, we're going to go with merchant instead. This gives us the lucky feat, so we have a number of luck points equal to our proficiency bonus, and we can spend them on things like having advantage on a d20 test, or forcing an enemy to have disadvantage. Then when it comes to choosing a class, we need to figure out what her main strength is as an ability score, and that's probably gonna be charisma, because she's so focused on beauty and things like that. So going with a charisma focused class, we're gonna go with a warlock. This will allow us to choose the nature skill, so we have both our bases covered for growing plants, and then to make sure we can wield a massive axe, we can grab the Eldritch Invocation, Pact of the Blade. This makes it so you can conjure a pact weapon, which can be any simple or martial melee weapon. And you can use your charisma modifier for the attack and damage rolls. So now you can wield a great axe and still just use your charisma for the attack and damage rolls. Make sure to get some more Eldritch Invocations as you level up in Warlock, because I would just take this as a pure 20 levels in Warlock and boost up those axe attacks with Thirsting Blade and Eldritch Smite at level 5, giving you an extra attack and giving you the ability to massively boost your damage. And specifically from Eldritch Smite, if you use your Eldritch Smite ability, you can knock an enemy prone if they're huge or smaller. And this is absolutely perfect for Persona 5 Royal, because knocking an enemy down will allow you to do an all-out attack with the rest of the Phantom Thieves. And knocking an enemy down in Dungeons & Dragons will knock them prone, and that gives everybody advantage on their melee attacks against them. So it works on both levels. Getting higher up, once you hit at least 9th level, grab Life Drinker to boost up your damage with that axe even more. And then once you get to 12th level of Warlock, grab Devouring Blade for an Eldritch Invocation, because that'll allow you to attack 3 times per attack action. Then, once you hit 3rd level in Warlock, you get to choose a Warlock subclass. And the type of damage that Noir or Haru's persona does is all mental or psychic damage. And the best way we can recreate that as a Warlock is by going with the Warlock subclass, the Great Old One Patron. So while I might not view her particular personas as a great old one, it still works as far as the abilities, because it gives you some additional spells that are mostly focused around mental attacks like Detect Thoughts, Dissonant Whispers, Phantasmal Force, Confusion, and you even get a summoning ability with Summon Aberration, but aberrations are usually pretty gross monsters, and I would definitely say her personas are a bit more beauty focused, so that might not work. You might have to roleplay that a little differently. But this Warlock subclass also gets the feature Psychic Spells. So any Warlock spell that you do, you can change its damage type to Psychic. And even when you cast a Warlock spell that is an enchantment or illusion spell, you can do so without using a verbal or somatic component. So now, anytime you're doing a damaging spell, it's automatically a Psychic spell, doing more of a mental attack, and that makes it so you have a huge number of spells you can choose without even bothering to worry about it because it'll still fit the character. This Warlock subclass also gets Thought Shield, so you have resistance to psychic damage, which definitely fits in the playstyle of Persona 5 Royal. And then once you can get Mystic Arcanums, which are higher level spells, just focus on the psychic stuff with things like Eye Bite, Power Word Pain, or even all the way at 9th level of spellcasting, I would grab the Mystic Arcanum for Psychic Scream, which is a massively powerful psychic attack that can literally make your enemies' heads explode. Then we gotta keep moving because we're still at the bottom of the list here. We gotta get to the next one. And the 9th most popular Persona 5 Royal character is Ryuji Sakamoto, codename Skull. He's seen as a bit of a troublemaker, but he really just wants to get back on the track team because he loves running. However, he was kind of screwed over, especially by the first villain that the Phantom Thieves come across, who was one of the biggest creeps that just really grossed me out, and I could not wait to absolutely destroy him in the game. When Ryuji is dressed up as a Phantom Thief, he usually wields bludgeoning weapons like clubs, baseball bats, or even sledgehammers. His ranged weapon is usually a shotgun, and his first persona is Captain Kidd, which usually deals lightning damage. So we're gonna have to figure that part out. Starting with the species, we're gonna go with human again, but when it gets to the background, I was really tempted to go with athlete because of his love for being on the track team and him wanting to get back on it. There isn't an updated athlete background in the 2024 updated version of D&D yet, and I really want to lean into those as much as possible. And then on top of that, his persona is Captain Kidd, who happens to be a pirate. He literally comes in riding on a pirate ship, and just to focus on the riding on top of stuff even more, he has the Chariot Arcana. So to lean into this as much as possible, we're gonna grab the background, Sailor. This will give us the Tavern Brawler feat, which gives us the ability to attack more with unarmed strikes, which basically helps us in no way, although it does also give us improvised weaponry, so we can have proficiency with improvised weapons. So if you're not actually wielding a sledgehammer, but you just grab a table leg or something, you can still have proficiency with it. Where Sailor does help us is the ability scores, because it allows us to focus purely on physical stuff, because Ryuji definitely is not high on the intelligence scale, the wisdom scale, and he's not super well liked, so he's definitely not high on the charisma scale either. So we need to focus on just strength, dexterity, and constitution. And the Sailor background can allow us to just focus on that strength and dexterity. So that's where we're going to throw pretty much all of our points, just into those physical stats. And then when we get to a class, being a bit more of a mindless attacker is kind of Ryuji's thing, so we're going to go with a Barbarian. This can allow us to have proficiency with the athletics skill, leaning into him being an athlete, and going in and attacking without thinking definitely fits with the first level feature of being a Barbarian, Rage. Gives you resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. You get bonus damage to strength-based attacks. You have advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, and you can't actually cast any spells or concentrate on them because you don't have the mental capacity to do so. But you can focus on particular types of weapons with weapon mastery. So you can grab things like a maul for a big sledgehammer, which will give you the topple feature. So if you hit a creature, you can force it to make a constitution saving throw and possibly knock it prone, which will allow your entire party to do an all-out attack. But you can also grab proficiency with a warhammer, and then when you level up in Barbarian, you get another weapon mastery, so you can just grab a club so you have basically all your bludgeoning weapons covered. You get the feature Reckless Attack at 2nd level of Barbarian, so you can attack without any sort of consideration for your own safety and get advantage on all of your attacks, but it makes it so all attacks against you have advantage as well. So we have the basics of Ryuji. Granted, we don't have the shotgun, but you can still wield the shotgun if you want. It's in D&D now. You just might not be super great at it being a barbarian. However, we also need to figure out how to do some lightning damage. And there's a barbarian subclass that makes that pretty easy by going with the path of the Storm Herald from Sanithar's Guide to Everything. This gives you the feature Storm Aura, so you can choose a type of storm. It can be a desert storm, a tundra storm, or a storm of the sea. We're going to go with sea because this allows us to do lightning damage, and it can hit anybody in your nearby aura, forcing a dexterity saving throw and dealing 1d6 lightning damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. The damage of this lightning increases at 10th level going to 2d6, 15th level going to 3d6, and 20th level going to 4d6. You can activate this aura over and over again on every bonus action, dealing that lightning damage repeatedly. Once you get to 5th level of Barbarian, you get fast movement, so you can really lean into being more of a track star and running, and this feature would boost your speed by 10 feet. Once you manage to get all the way to 14th level of being a Storm Herald, you get Raging Storm, so when you hit a creature with that lightning damage, you can force them to make a strength save or possibly to be knocked prone, which again gives you another way to do an all-out attack. And then once you get all the way to 19th level, you'll be able to get an epic boon. And we're going to grab the boon of speed to focus on that running and that track star side of you. This allows you to boost your speed by an additional 30 feet. So you are definitely one of the fastest members of the Phantom Thieves. Outside of maybe one caveat, and that caveat is for the next most popular character, ranking 8th on the popularity poll, Morgana, aka Mona, the member of the Phantom Thieves that is totally convinced they are not a cat, they're really a person, even though they're definitely just a cat. And the way that there's a bit of a caveat here is Morgana does have the ability to turn into essentially like a van or a bus for the rest of the Phantom Thieves to ride in, so there might be some capability for that to go faster. And mild spoiler alert, at the end of Persona 5 Royal, Morgana does have the ability to turn into a helicopter as well. So that is worth noting. We need to figure that out if we can. I know those are spoilers, but this game's been out for a long time, and frankly, if you're watching the entirety of this video, I kind of assume that you're probably familiar with the game. Morgana is the default healer of the Phantom Thieves right from the start, and Morgana also has the ability to cast spells that are related to wind. Morgana is also a straight-up entity of Mementos and the weird realities that occur in Persona 5. Morgana is even discovered inside a palace when the protagonist of the game first goes into the really creepy dude's palace that I hate that guy. So starting off with the species, we finally get to choose a cat. It's going to be the only non-human for the majority of this video, because being a cat means we get to choose a tabaxi. Tabaxi are the most cat-like creatures in D&D. And then when it comes to a background, Morgana is a bit of a guide, knowing more about Mementos and the palaces than any other member of the Phantom Thieves in Persona 5. So in Dungeons & Dragons, we're going to translate that to the background guide, as Morgana guides the rest of the Phantom Thieves. This gives us the Magic Initiate feat, allowing us to dive into the Druid spell list and grabbing 2 cantrips and 1 spell. Focusing on the wind stuff, we'll grab Gust. Guiding the party, we'll grab Guidance, and for a healing spell, we'll grab Cure Wounds. Then when it comes to a class, we need Morgana to be able to use their slingshot, their curved sword, and then for their persona, they do have Zoro, which uses a rapier, so if we can cover that too, that'd be great. And the way to cover all of those pretty easily is with the updated Druid that came out in 2024, because the Druids now have a lot more versatility. They obviously get plenty of spellcasting, which all of our spellcasting is going to be focused on wind or healing, but we need to bend the idea slightly of what wind can do, because blasting somebody with wind, we're gonna also kind of lean that maybe it can be thunder damage, because thunder is nothing but a strong vibration in the air. So we're gonna lean into that. And it opens up the capabilities of a lot of the damaging spells we can do, like grabbing Thunderclap for a cantrip, but we can also grab Thunder Wave for a first level spell, or more directly wind focused spells like Dust Devil, Gust of Wind, Wind Wall, Summon Elemental to summon a Wind Elemental, Investiture of Wind, Wind Walk, Whirlwind, and then obviously every healing spell we can grab, like we already grabbed, Cure Wounds, and then move on to grab Healing Word, Mass Cure Wounds, Heal, Regenerate, and there's a few other spells I'll have on the character sheet, and I'll have every character sheet for every one of these builds on Patreon. I just can't go super in-depth without making this video like 4 hours long. So if you want the full in-depth breakdown, they'll be up on Patreon, but I'm going to keep it moving. Going through the actual Druid features, the first thing you get at first level is a Primal Order, and Morgana happens to have the Magician Arcana, which is one of the choices here. But choosing the Magician Primal Order just gives you some bonuses to certain skills and gives you another cantrip, and we don't really need that. So we're going to go with the Warden Primal Order. This allows us to have proficiency with martial weapons and medium armor. Having proficiency with martial weapons gives us access to scimitars, which would be the curved sword that Morgana uses all the time. We can also use a sling, which is the replacement for a slingshot that Morgana uses for a ranged weapon. And it also allows us to have a rapier if we want to roleplay that we're using it instead of our persona, Zoro, or the fully awakened persona, Diego, skipping over Mercurius, who's in the middle there. Also, to make sure we can turn into something for the rest of the Phantom Thieves to ride, Druids at second level get Wild Shape, so they can shapeshift into another type of creature. It could be basically any beast with some limitations on the power of that beast, so just turn into the biggest thing you can so everybody can ride you, which is a weird thing to say out loud. But you can't choose anything with flying until you get to an 8th level of Druid. So no helicopters right away, at least. Then when it comes to choosing a Druid subclass, that's a little tough. I was tempted to go with the new Druid of the Sea because it can push enemies away and that feels like wind, but it's so sea focused and water focused, it just doesn't feel right. So instead, again, this is a bit of a spoiler, at the end of the Persona 5 base game, Morgana kind of starts to fade away and glow with a sparkliness as they defeat this big, massive god. So leaning into the concept of that idea, I'm going to go with a Stars Druid. The Circle of the Stars gives you the feature Starry Form, so you can take on that idea at some point. You can glimmer with a starry form, and you can choose a type of constellation, either boosting up your damage as the constellation of the Archer, which will allow you to hurl a luminous arrow dealing radiant damage as a bonus action, which doesn't necessarily fit super well, but it does also give you the ability to have the starry form of the Chalice instead, which will boost up your healing capabilities, because then whenever you cast a spell that uses a spell slot to restore hit points to a creature, you can heal an extra 1d8 plus your wisdom modifier to any creature within 30 feet of you. The final constellation you can choose is the Dragon constellation, which will just boost up your concentration checks. This feature does get improved at level 10 of being a Stars Druid, boosting up by an additional 1d8 for the Archer and Chalice, and giving you a flying speed if you choose the Dragon constellation. And to really hammer home that idea of what you look like towards the end of the game, being that starry form, you have the feature at 14th level of being a Stars Druid called Full of Stars, where you become partially incorporeal and you gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Those are the main features of being Morgana, but I would definitely focus mostly on wisdom whenever possible because you have a better understanding of how things work in Mementos than most of the other Phantom Thieves, so a higher wisdom score does make sense. We need to jump into one of the more ridiculous members of the Phantom Thieves. I don't know how else to describe him, with the 7th most popular character from Persona 5 Royal, Yusuke Kitagawa, aka Fox. He happens to be voiced by Dungeons & Dragons royalty Matt Mercer. In his more Phantom Thief form, he wields more Japanese-style swords like a katana, but just generally swords, and his ranged weapon is an assault rifle. Every persona he summons is more of an artistic representation of a samurai, with Gomon, Kamu Susano, and Gorokichi, and he becomes a member of the Phantom Thieves after the party is dealing with Madarame, his mentor, because Yusuke is an aspiring art student. Basically, the only thing he truly cares about is art. That is his main thing, outside of possibly figuring out some budget cooking recipes. Eventually, he has to go up against his own mentor and realize that Madarame was truly just stealing other people's works and destroying people's artistic capabilities, to the point that Madarame even took advantage of Yusuke's own mother, who was a prolific artist, without anyone ever even knowing. This awakens Yusuke's persona, who can deal plenty of cold or ice-based attacks. So we need to figure out all of that. We'll stick with a basic human, but when it comes to a background, we need to focus on the art. So we're going to go with the artisan background. This allows us to get a tool proficiency that we can choose right away. And we'll grab painter's supplies, really leaning into the artistic capabilities of the character. And this also gives us the feat crafter. And considering Yusuke can help you recreate certain skill cards in the game once your relationship with them gets strong enough, crafter seems definitely fitting. This allows you to craft different types of things that you'd be proficient with, and you can choose some additional tools to be proficient with as well. So we'll make sure we're proficient with things like calligrapher's supplies or weaver's tools or woodcarver's tools. Basically anything you can reasonably justify would make sense for recreating skill cards. Then when it comes to some ability scores, Yusuke's going to be a little tricky because wisdom is definitely not his thing. He has like 0 insight, so we're going to dump wisdom. But we're going to need some sort of spellcasting ability. And I would say that Yusuke doesn't really have the charisma to interact with people properly. He's really awkward about things. However, when it comes to art and his understanding of color theory and how to create things, he's pretty smart. So I'm going to go with intelligence for his main casting ability, but we're going to focus more on physical stuff first. So this is actually going to be our first multi-class of this video. First, focusing on the physical part by going with a fighter. Becoming a fighter allows us to choose a fighting style right away, and you usually use a one-handed sword. So we're going to take this fighting style, dueling. This gives us a +2 bonus to our damage with one-handed weapons. We also get to choose a bunch of weapon masteries, but we're just going to grab a long sword, and that's really all we care about, which gives us the weapon mastery sap. So when you hit a creature with your long sword, they have disadvantage on their next attack roll before the start of your next turn. Second level of fighter gives you action surge, so you can take 2 actions in a single turn. And then at third level of fighter, you can choose a fighter subclass. And considering Yusuke's style of fighting plus his personas being entirely stylized versions of samurais, we're gonna choose the samurai subclass. And this helps us in more ways than one, because it also gives us a bonus proficiency, which is usually focused more on the artistic side of being a samurai, because samurais were often really good at calligraphy or poetry or things like that. Becoming a samurai also gives you fighting spirit, so as a bonus action on your turn, you can give yourself advantage on weapon attacks and gaining 5 temporary hit points when you do so. That temporary hit points increases to 10 temp HP at level 10 and 15 at 15th level, but we're not going to get that high in fighter. And you can use this feature 3 times per long rest. 5th level of fighter will give us extra attack, and then once you get all the way to 11th level of fighter, you actually get 2 extra attacks. So you can attack 3 times per attack action. Then I would take fighter all the way to 12th level because you get plenty of ability score improvements, because fighter gets more ability score improvements than any other type of class in D&D. Then once you get through 12 levels of fighter, you're going to want to multi-class into wizard, because wizard is allowing us to use our intelligence modifier for all of our spell casting. Wizard is all focused on spells. We're going to just try and grab every cold spell we can. I'll add it to the character sheet, but I gotta keep things moving. And when you decide to choose a wizard, you can level up to 3rd level of wizard, allowing you to choose a wizard subclass. And we're going to go with the order of the scribes, because choosing Yusuke allows us to create different skill cards and abilities that we can add to our personas. And Order of the Scribes is really focused on creating spell scrolls and things like that. Granted, you have to get to a much higher level of wizard in order to be able to easily create spell scrolls with this subclass, but the idea and concept is still there throughout. It gives you the feature Wizardly Quill, so you can copy spells into your spellbook much more quickly. You can cast ritual spells a lot more easily, and most importantly, whenever you cast a wizard spell that actually uses a spell slot, you can temporarily replace its damage with another damage type that appears at the same level of spell casting. So it's that much easier to deal cold damage as much as you want, sticking to the overall style and theme of Yusuke. Just take Wizard all the way through 8th level, and that way you can get as many cold spells as you can, but you still have that samurai feel from your 12 levels in Fighter. Then let's keep things moving to a character that I actually built a while ago, and it didn't do very well for my channel, but I still liked building her. And part of the reason I'm doing this entire video is that I couldn't justify doing each one of these characters separately, so doing them in one massive video seemed to make more sense. But I gotta rebuild her again in an updated fashion to make it a bit more usable, because the 6th most popular character from Persona 5 Royal is An Takamaki, codename Panther. She's a character that actually gets lusted over in both flattering ways by the protagonist and very creepy ways by antagonists in the game, and she uses her beauty and charm to even help the party later when dealing with Yusuke and trying to be a model for them, and she actually is a model in her spare time as well as a job. Her melee weapon is a whip, she has a ranged weapon for submachine guns, and focusing more on the charisma and beauty and charming other characters, she even has the Lover's Arcana and has the personas Carmen, Hecate, and Celestine. All personas focused more on beauty, but they also do plenty of fire damage. When it comes to a species, this is one of the few other Phantom Thieves I was very tempted to go with something other than human, as her codename is Panther. But if I'm not going to try and go with a fox for Yusuke, I'm not going to try and go with a panther for her. So I'll stick with human. For an extra skill when you become a human, I'll grab Persuasion. And you get a feat when you become a human in the 2024 edition of D&D. So I'm going to grab Magic Initiate and dive into the Druid spell list. But I'm still going to focus on Charisma for our main ability scores, so that's how I'm going to set up this feat. But by going into Druid, I'm going to grab Produce Flame for the more fire-based attacks that she has, as well as Thorn Whip, because then you can get the whip right away. But I also wanted to grab some sort of healing spell because when she levels up enough, she does get access to some healing. So I'm going to grab Healing Word. Then when it comes to a background, she's one of the few starting Phantom Thieves that are part of the initial misfits of the group. So leaning into that, there's a background that actually states that you grew up around similarly ill-fated cast-offs. That feels fitting for the Phantom Thieves in general, so I'm going to go with Wayfarer. This gives us the Lucky feat, so you get a number of luck points equal to your proficiency bonus, and you can spend them to get advantage on a d20 test, or force an enemy to have disadvantage. And then when it comes to an actual class, like I said, we gotta focus more on charisma than anything else. And even though a sorcerer would do plenty of fire-based damage, I need to make sure we can attack pretty well with our whip and make sure that we have some ability to use our submachine guns for our ranged weapon. So I'm going to dive into a Warlock again. This will allow us to dive into the Eldritch Invocations, and we're going to go with the Pact of the Blade. This will give us amazing access to improving our whip capabilities, because we can still boost it up with Eldritch Smite, we can get more attacks with Thirsting Blade and Devouring Blade, and to make sure we have access to our Uzis or submachine guns, we can grab the cantrip Eldritch Blast, which gets multiple blasts that shoot out, and we can boost up the damage of those with the other Eldritch Invocation, Agonizing Blast, allowing us to add our charisma modifier to every blast that comes from our Eldritch Blast. Then jumping straight ahead to the Warlock subclass, we're going to choose the Fiend Patron. The reason we want to go with the Fiend Patron is it gives us access to more fire-based spells, which is An's thing, because the Fiend spell list gives us access to Burning Hands, Scorching Ray, Fireball, because it's Fireball, you can't miss out on Fireball, as well as Fire Shield and Wall of Fire. You get features like Dark One's Blessing, so when you take down an enemy, you gain temp HP. The amount of temp HP is equal to your Charisma modifier plus your Warlock level, but that's a lot of temp HP. You get better luck because you have Dark One's Luck, and on top of your lucky feat, that means you're super lucky. You can get Fiendish Resilience, giving you resistance to a type of damage, so you can make sure you're resistant to fire damage, and overall you're good with your whip, you have great charisma, and you have access to plenty of fire spells. You even get an absolutely amazing ability at 14th level of being a Fiend Warlock with Hurl Through Hell. Granted, that deals psychic damage, not fire damage, but it's still an intense ability where you're literally taking your enemy, sending them through hell to deal a bunch of damage, and it's a pretty epic ability. But that takes us through all of the bottom 5 most popular characters. Now, we're getting into the top 5. And before we jump into the top 5 characters, I wouldn't have been able to make such a massive video if it wasn't for the help of this video sponsor, Enclave. Enclave is a tabletop RPG with no dice, and it's very heavily focused on role-playing as well as keeping with the flow of the game without a ton of setup. And one of the things I appreciated the most about this sponsor is they required that I played the game with them before I said anything about them in a video. So that way I could say my true feelings about it, and they had 0 restrictions on it. It allowed me to really get to know the game, as well as get a feel for some of the classes you can play as in the game. I personally played as a Thunderbird, and we were part of the Enclave, sent on a solo mission, so it's very much set up for one-shots, but you get to have a continuous character throughout. Next thing you know, I'm fighting a bunch of mutants, and I got to pull off this straight-up Thor move where I slammed down in a bolt of lightning and completely obliterated this preacher guy that was trying to make himself a martyr. It was all sorts of crazy. The base game also allows you to play things like a gunslinger or a thane. They have an expansion coming out where you can play things like a witch hunter. And another cool thing about it is that when you're playing, you have special items or abilities that you can access, but when you level up, you get additional choices for these items which heavily influence your character. So while there are a considerable amount of base classes, the ever branching versatility of how you build that character out makes it so you have an endless amount of choices. It's basically like Path of Exile's progression grid with how many choices you have. I personally highly recommend it, and if you want to check it out, I have an affiliate link both in the description and comments down below. It's truly a solid tabletop RPG that's easy to pick up, easy to move through, and it doesn't get bogged down with too many mechanics or anything like that. It just lets you flow with the storytelling, and it's a ton of fun. So thank you again to Enclave. But let's get back to the top 5 most popular Persona 5 Royal characters and how to build them in D&D. And the 5th most popular character is the one that I had the most trouble with, because it's Akechi. And this part's gonna definitely have some spoilers, so go ahead and skip ahead to the next one. I'll put a time code down below if you don't want to know the secrets of Akechi. So you've been warned. But Akechi is more of a dual character because he has 2 sides to him, and he needs to have the dark side and the light side, and it was just a lot for me to figure out. So I actually wound up calling in some backup. I reached out to GMD, aka Game Master's Domain, and he was able to lend a hand, especially since he's done a massive video like this before. So I definitely appreciate the backup.
Hey RJ, thank you for having me on, and of course I would love to take Akechi off your hands. He's definitely a bit of a weird character, and there are a few different ways you could build him depending on what you want to focus on. And funnily enough, Akechi is the only Phantom Thief that I didn't make myself back when I did my Persona 5 video. And since I don't want to take up too much of your audience's time, let's dive right into Goro Akechi. Now, like I said, Akechi is a bit of a weird character with multiple different ways you could build him depending on what point in the story you want to build him. And because RJ reassured me that there will be a spoiler warning on this video, I'm going to go for the end of Persona 5 Royal, which is a little different from the end of the base game. And you'll see why here in a minute if you don't already know. So throughout the game, we learn quite a bit about Akechi and his past. When he first gets introduced, he's a detective working with the cops and has some pretty clashing ideologies with the main character, being very openly against the vigilante justice, which is kind of the Phantom Thief's entire thing. And while Akechi appears to be a squeaky clean do-gooder, he really isn't, and the signs are there pretty much as soon as you meet him. And yes, I'm referring to the pancake incident. But despite this and their clashing ideologies, Akechi and Joker actually share quite a bit in common. For one, they can both use multiple personas, technically. While Joker can kind of have an infinite number of them, really whatever he needs, Akechi has 2. Robin Hood and Loki. But the other thing they share in common is that Shido screwed up both of their lives. For Joker, he got him arrested for just defending someone, and for Akechi, well, it's a bit deeper than that. Because for Joker, Shido was just some politician willing to ruin other people's lives to better his own, but for Akechi, Shido's his dad. And whether he knows that or not is kind of up for debate, but Akechi certainly knew. And for some reason, I really doubt that Akechi is the only illegitimate child that Shido has running around, especially considering his nighttime activities. So while Joker definitely has a few bones to pick with Shido, Akechi has dedicated his entire life to taking down his father, going so far as to help push him closer to being Prime Minister just so that he can take him down to his highest point. And at some point during this, Akechi becomes Shido's lapdog, using his powers as a persona user to take out his political opponents or anyone else that could potentially expose his wrongdoings by killing their shadows in the metaverse. And he's been doing this seemingly at least for a few years, and was also maybe potentially the person that killed Futaba's mom. So yeah, despite presenting himself as a squeaky clean good guy cop, Akechi is far from it. But honestly, I think I've taken up just a little bit too much time on just Akechi's backstory, so let's get into his actual build here. Now obviously Akechi is going to be a human. I did consider going Fallen Aasimar for some more metaverse stuff, but you can do that if you want to. I'm going to stick with human and the alert feat. And while you could also very easily give him the guard background, I decided to make up my own, because that's usually what I end up doing on my videos, and made the custom background the Vengeful Investigator for a +2 Charisma and +1 Strength, along with the Savage Attacker feat, which is just going to help his damage be a little bit more consistent. And if you're going in the same direction as I am for his actual build, his stats are going to make plenty of sense with a focus again on Charisma and Strength. And the other stats are fine, 13 Con, 12 Intelligence because he is pretty smart, 10 Dex, and 8 Wisdom. And while I don't really think his wisdom should be quite this low, he also never really thought that Shido might get rid of him before he could do the same to his father. But with Akechi's stats out of the way, it is time for us to tackle his two-faced nature when it comes to his personas, because again, he has two, the Blessed-focused Robin Hood or the Cursed-focused Loki, one of which he uses while working with the Phantom Thieves, while the other one is relegated to, well, murder for Shido. And taking a look at how Akechi presents himself as this upright cop who stands for justice, I think there's really only one class that can cover this half of him, and pretty obviously that's going to be the Paladin. And I'm gonna say this now because if you're building Akechi to actually play him as a character, and you're not starting off at really high levels, go with the Oath of Devotion here because that seems to fit best. He's got a laser sword and he's just a goody two-shoes in general, which is kind of what that entire subclass is. But knowing Akechi, he's not going to stay with that subclass for long, because Paladins are one of the few classes that can actually change their subclass, not at will, but with a little bit of effort. Because I'd say right about when he stabs you in the back, Akechi goes from an Oath of Devotion to an Oathbreaker Paladin. And while this is less him actually changing oaths and more his true oath hidden underneath the Oath of Devotion, mechanics are weird here, so whatever. What we're really here for, though, are things like the spells, which include Inflict Wounds, Crown of Madness, and Darkness, which are great for Loki, but also his Channel Divinities, Control Undead, great for controlling shadows, and Dreadful Aspect, causing a certain number of creatures within 30 feet to be afraid of Akechi. Now, there was one ability that I was really worried about getting for Akechi, but as it turns out, the Oathbreaker Paladin just kinda gives it to him at level 7 with Aura of Hate. Not only giving Akechi a bonus to his damage equal to his Charisma modifier, but also any fiends or undead within 10 feet of him, and they don't even have to be allied to Akechi, they just have to be near him. Now at this point is also where Akechi just kinda goes full crazy mode and dives full into his Loki persona. But real quick before we dive into that, let's quickly cover the one feat he takes and his ASI at level 8 of Paladin. Those being the Charger feat, which can in fact stack with Paladin Smites, for a +1 to Strength, and then an ASI at level 8 for a +1 Charisma and a +1 Constitution. And level 8 is where Akechi is going to stop being a Paladin and jump over to his second class, which of course is going to be the Warlock. And my reason for picking this class is really simple. The Hexblade Warlock fits Akechi perfectly. Just like Joker, Akechi gets his powers kind of from an outside source, but also kind of not. But while Joker uses these powers for vigilante justice and to build bonds with his friends, Akechi uses them to murder people. And the Hexblade Warlock is really good at murdering people. Not only does the Hexblade Warlock get to use its Charisma for attack and damage rolls, but it also comes with a ton of different spells and invocations that can make it even stronger. Invocations like Agonizing Blast so his gun does more damage, Armor of Shadows for free mage armor, Pack of the Blade, Thirsting Blade, Eldritch Smite, and Devouring Blade for 3 attacks in a turn, Mask of Many Faces for transitioning between his two personas, and Otherworldly Leap because I needed an 8th one. And of course his spells are really important too, with Eldritch Blast and True Strike for his basic cantrips, Divine Smite, Divine Favor, Heroism, Hex, Protection from Good and Evil, Shield of Faith, Wrathful Smite, but also for a little bit of synergy with Aura of Hate, he's going to take Summon Undead and Spirit of Death. Two spells which again not only benefit from the extra damage of Aura of Hate, but are also going to add to the action economy. And lastly for his spells, because he doesn't technically get this as a spell, it's more of a once per day feature, he's going to take Summon Fiend as his level 11 Mystic Arcanum, which again also benefits from Aura of Hate because it's a fiend. And for once, the level 6 ability from Hexblade Warlock, Accursed Spectre, isn't out of place because again, you kill a humanoid and you cause a spectre to rise from its corpse that is under your control, and that is an undead, which again benefits from Aura of Hate. And Armor of Hexes is going to make Akechi really hard to hit, because every time a creature affected by his curse tries to attack him, he gets to roll a d6, and on a 4 or higher, it just misses. And that's not once per turn, it just happens. And outside of a few feats and ASIs like Warcaster and Actor to max out his Charisma and a +2 to Constitution so he can stay up a little bit longer, Akechi's pretty much done. And while there are a few things that I just kinda glossed over or didn't really touch on, like his Paladin features or some of Akechi's spells, I do feel like I've been rambling about him for a little bit too long. Look, he's a fun character, and the fact that he is so pissed off about being brought back to life by Maruki that he is going to make it everybody else's problem is just hilarious to me. But yeah, that about does it.
That is perfect. That helped an absolutely amazing amount. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, look, not a problem, dude. It was fun building Akechi, so thank you for having me on here, RJ. I will see you next time, and hopefully that next time is at Extra Life.
Now that we've gotten through one of the more complicated ones, I gotta dive into a character that's actually not technically playable in the game, but she does help out the entire party, and she is a core member of the Phantom Thieves because the fourth most popular character from Persona 5 Royal is Futaba Sakura, aka Oracle, or also kind of known as Medjed at one point. She has the Necronomicon persona, which does get upgraded to Prometheus and then Al-Azif, and despite having Necronomicon as a persona, she's not actually necromancy focused. She's actually a purely support character. She works entirely in the background, and she's hardcore focused on tech while guiding the party and boosting them up. And we meet her as she's locked away in her room, not willing to leave for anything. She actually reaches out to the Phantom Thieves to have them change her heart so that way she can come back out into the world. So the fact that she has the Hermit Arcana is insanely fitting. Eventually the party makes their way through her heart and is able to change it after they discover the truth that she feels responsible for the death of her own mother, but in reality, it wasn't actually her fault, as her mother was actually investigating a lot of the craziness that happens within the metaverse already, and there were other people that were a bit more interested and more willing to do evil things to her to get her out of the picture. So how do we build Futaba? Well, let's start with the species. We're going to go with human again. Big surprise. As a pure support type character, we're going to take the feat that comes with being a human and choose the origin feat Alert. This makes it so when you roll initiative, you can add your proficiency bonus to the roll and you get the feature Initiative Swap. So you can actually swap your initiative with another character. So if you want to stay on the back lines, this is absolutely perfect for it. When it comes to the background, you are the Hermit Arcana. There is a Hermit background that fits perfectly, and that's what we're going to choose, the Hermit background. This gives us the Healer feat. This gives you 2 features as part of this feat. So you can use Battle Medic, so it makes you a little better at using healing kits, or Healing Rerolls. So when you roll die to determine the number of hit points that you restore with a spell or with the Battle Medic Healer's Kit, you can re-roll any ones that you roll for the healing, making sure that you can do a bit more healing more often. Then when it comes to a class, we need something where we can be as supportive as possible, but we definitely don't want charisma, and we want to be as intelligence focused as possible, as she is all about hacking and being a more gadget user or things like that. So we're going to choose the class Artificer. This is the most tech-focused class we can possibly choose, and it's actually great for being a support type character, because Artificers have a feature called Infuse Item. So they're able to create infusions to boost up items that anybody is carrying. It can be something that they are carrying, but they can just as easily be a purely support type of character, boosting up your allies instead, allowing you to use all of your Artificer infusions on just your allies. So you want things like an enhanced arcane focus, which will give you a +1 bonus to spell attack rolls, and that upgrades to a +2 at 10th level. Similarly, you can grab an enhanced weapon to enhance a weapon with a +1 bonus to the attack and damage rolls that upgrades to a +2, enhanced defense to boost up armor class in a similar fashion, and then to wear your own weird goggle things, you can grab the Helm of Awareness, so you have advantage on initiative rolls, which will just boost up your alert feat even further. Then you can grab other stuff like replicating a magic item for a Headband of Intellect or Medallion of Thoughts. You can boost up armor classes even more with a Ring of Protection. When you need to snatch somebody's phone to hack into it really quick, you can wear something like the Gloves of Thievery, or you can boost up somebody's strength with the Built of Hill Giant Strength. There are tons of options, all of which will boost up your party in great ways. You want to make sure you have every buffing type of spell you can grab from the Artificer spell list, grabbing spells like Healing Word to heal your party, Lesser Restoration, magic weapon to boost up your damage of weapons even more, or elemental weapon to give you some elemental damage. Make your allies faster with haste, heal up everybody with mass healing word. Be a better scout for the party with arcane eye, allowing you to scout an entire level of mementos, or summon your persona to the battlefield with summon construct, all of which fit Futaba perfectly. But when you get to choose an artificer subclass, that's where you have to focus even more on boosting your party. Because as of right now, there's only 4 artificer subclasses. There's the armor, which won't really help your party very much. The artillerist, which is more about shooting, and that doesn't fit either. The battlesmith, which could maybe fit for summoning your persona, as it allows you to make a robot pet type of thing. There's the homebrew I just made, which of course doesn't fit because I don't usually throw homebrews into these videos. And then there's the alchemist, which is perfect for boosting your party. The alchemist is all about making concoctions to boost everybody up. You get some default spells added to your spell list, like healing word, mass healing word, death ward to help save your party, and some other damaging stuff, but we don't care as much about that. More importantly, you get experimental elixirs. So you can actually create concoctions that'll help your party. It can do things like give some healing for 2d4 plus your intelligence modifier, boost up some walking speed by +10 for an hour, boost up armor class by +1 for 10 minutes, giving them some boldness so they can get a +1d4 for every attack roll and saving throw they make for the next minute, giving them some flying speed if they need it, but a slightly minimal flying speed with just a 10 feet of flying for 10 minutes, or you can transform somebody entirely as if they're under the effect of the Alter Self spell. It's basically the most supportive artificer we can be. And this gets boosted up even more. Once you hit 15th level of being an alchemist artificer, you get chemical mastery, so you can cast greater restoration and heal without even using a spell slot. So in general, I think this concept fits Futaba perfectly. Now, moving on from Futaba, we're in the top 3. The third most popular character. This one is impossible to talk about without some spoilers. It is a Persona 5 Royal exclusive, and that's Kasumi Yoshizawa. And spoiler, she's also known as Sumire. Her codename is Violet, and she's got a pretty tragic backstory, which is kind of commonplace for most of the Phantom Thieves at this point. She's a gymnast focused more on the dancing floor techniques, wielding a rapier and a pretty awesome gun, but she had an older sister who was also a gymnast and who was absolutely incredible that she always looked up to. She was always trying to do better at gymnastics, to the point that she got so upset that she wasn't doing well enough, she ran out into a street without looking, and her sister had to dive out, saving her, pushing her out of the way of a car, and sacrificing herself in the process. This absolutely broke Sumire's mental state to the point that she just wanted Kasumi back, and she actually took on Kasumi's identity, to the point it fractured reality as a whole, unlocking a new antagonist in the game while allowing her to live out being this other person, her sister. Eventually, she was able to work past it, take on her true self as Sumire, and even taking on the codename Violet, but she awakens the persona Cendrillon, which can actually upgrade 2 more times all the way to the Ella persona. And I gotta admit, when I got to her story in the game, which by the way, took me 2 tries because I didn't actually realize there was an entire extra semester in Persona 5 Royal until I beat it, was watching somebody else play it, and then realized they were getting something additional that I hadn't gotten, so I immediately stopped watching them play it and went back to get the extra semester because I was so obsessed with this game. But once I finally got to her story at its core, it hit me pretty hard. And she's an absolutely amazing character to try and build. But she's also a little tricky at the same time, because her persona is all about dealing holy type of damage or blessed damage in the game. And the way that translates into Dungeons & Dragons is usually by dealing radiant damage, or just focusing purely on physical damage. So, in order to figure this out, I think the best way to go is with the Acolyte background, because she actually has the Arcana of the Faith, and Acolyte really fits with this. This allows us to have the Magic Initiate feat, giving us access to the Cleric spell list for a couple cantrips and one spell. So we'll make sure to grab Sacred Flame, which does radiant damage as a cantrip, as well as Word Radiance. Then, because you deal bless damage in the game, even though that does translate to radiant damage, we'll also grab the first level spell, Bless. Then when it comes to a class, I can't keep going with Cleric, despite the fact that she does plenty of radiant style damage. She is much more of a performer, a gymnast, and does more dance performances. So instead, we're gonna go with a bard. And her actual abilities aren't gonna kick in quite as early, which actually makes sense because you can't really have her as a member of the party until you actually hit the additional content in Royal. So I guess it works either way, because first, we just gotta focus on using the rapier and the more stylish flourishes you're doing. We'll make sure to grab skills in acrobatics and performance. Bards can boost up their skills with expertise, giving them double proficiency bonus with them. They can inspire others with their performances, which I feel like can make sense. And then at third level of Bard, they get to choose a Bard subclass. And despite the fact that she's doing lots of dancing, the Bard College of Dance doesn't quite fit with her abilities because the College of Dance is about not wearing armor and punching with your hands, and she uses a rapier pretty much all the time, which we need to make sure we get proficiency with. And bards by default in the 2024 edition only get proficiency with simple weapons. So to make sure we get proficiency with martial weapons to get access to that rapier, as well as the gun that we need to be able to shoot off, we're going to grab the bard subclass, College of Valor. This gives us access to martial weapons and medium armor. That martial weapon can even be your spellcasting focus. Once you get to 6th level of Bard, you can get extra attack, and on top of that, you can actually replace one of your attacks with a cantrip if you want to. This even gets boosted further once you get all the way to 14th level of being a Valor Bard with battle magic. So if you have a spell that has a casting time of an action, you can make one attack with a weapon as a bonus action. But what we really need is back at 10th level of being a Bard, which is Magical Secrets. This allows us to dive into the Wizard, Cleric, or Druid spell list and be able to use those as Bard spells. This is where we finally get access to enough radiant damaging spells to make it really seem more like Kasumi or Samire, and we can grab any spell we want to at that point. We already have a few thanks to our feat, but also make sure to grab Sword Burst because one of the abilities your persona has is Sword Dance, and it does a bunch of physical damage, and Sword Dance feels like Sword Burst to me, so it makes sense. But another great way to pull off a massive sword dance, because it actually deals colossal physical damage with that ability, is Steel Wind Strike. You can inflict dizzy with your Dazzler ability, so you want to make sure you have Confusion, and then grab a few radiant focused spells, which I'll make sure to fill those up on Patreon, but you just want to grab anything that seems like it does some radiant damage, because the Bard default spell list is so focused on enchantment and stuff that it's not really going to fit until you get those magical secrets. Then we get a character that isn't just for Royal. Ranked second most popular in Persona 5 Royal, we have Makoto Nijima, codename Queen. Frankly, I love this character. She was the person I wound up tying my character to most at the end and wanted to see her complete ending, despite the fact that I just generally love this game and tried to see everybody's ending at certain points. Like seriously, I've put in close to 200 hours into this game. I love it. But Makoto is the sister of the main investigator looking into the Phantom Thieves. She is the student council president, so she is actually pretty popular at the high school, and she's sent on a mission by the high school principal to figure out who these Phantom Thieves are, which is especially weird in context because they're literally being investigated by the police. So a principal assuming that a random student can just figure it out is kind of weird, and the fact that he was like threatening her to sort it out is even worse. Eventually she winds up joining up with the Phantom Thieves because really she wants to get back at this criminal who's been taking advantage of students and putting them in terrible financial situations to force them to do illegal activities to make him more money. And that sense of justice is very important to her. Not to mention she has the persona Johanna, which actually pops up as a motorcycle, which is kind of cool, but it's kind of a transformer and can turn into more of a humanoid shape, but it actually deals nuclear damage. And the only way to deal nuclear damage in D&D to either lean into poison, which doesn't quite feel right, or we can lean into radiant damage, which I know is a bit of an overlap with the blessed damage, but it's probably the closest we're gonna get, because nuclear damage would cause radiation, and radiation, while it is kind of a poisonous thing, it is also radiation, so we can translate that to radiant. So I think it works. We also need to sort out Makoto's actual weapons because she does more fist punching type of attacks, and her ranged weapon is a revolver. So to sort out all of these abilities, let's dive in. As far as the species, we're going human again. Big surprise. I think of her as a pretty tough character. She is able to punch with her straight up fists, so I'm going to take the tough feat as part of being a human. And then when it comes to a background, she does have the priestess arcana, but I don't want to go with acolyte because she is the president of the student council. So I'm actually going to go with noble, which gives us the skilled feat. So I'm going to make sure we have proficiency in athletics, intimidation, and investigation as part of that skilled feat. Then the ability scores really help us out because she is able to have some pretty strong punches. So we're going to boost up our strength, and our secondary stat is going to be our charisma because she is well liked enough to become the student council president. So with those two ability scores being our main focus, and her incredible sense of justice and wanting to do what's right, I think it's absolutely perfect for her to be a paladin. Paladins are all about justice and making sure you stick to the law to some extent. And the fact that on top of everything else, her sister is a cop investigating the Phantom Thieves. She has so many ties to justice on top of even her dad was a cop. It's just so much law stuff. It's perfect for a paladin. Becoming a paladin post 2024 gives you spellcasting right away. So grab spells like Divine Favor, boosting up all of your damage with melee attacks by 1d4 radiant damage. And it doesn't require concentration, it lasts a minute, it's just a great little boost. Also make sure to grab Divine Smite, so when you punch somebody, you can punch them extra hard, dealing a bunch of radiant damage. And speaking of punching, once you hit 2nd level of Paladin, you get a fighting style. So we get to choose unarmed fighting, so we can cover using our fist for weapons. And post 2024, you can now smite with your fists, so it works either way. Then we gotta choose a Paladin subclass at level 3, and there's 2 general options here. You can go with Oath of Devotion, which is about justice, but you're more about punishing those that deserve justice. And that actually aligns more with an Oath of Vengeance paladin, especially since Oath of Devotion also focuses more on actual physical weapons, and we're not using that most of the time, so it's better to go with Oath of Vengeance either way. Becoming an Oath of Vengeance paladin allows you some more Oath of Vengeance spells, so you can get things like Hunter's Mark and Hold Person. Hold Person is absolutely amazing to have as a paladin because Hold Person makes it so somebody is paralyzed, and when you hit somebody that's paralyzed with a melee attack and hit them, it is automatically a crit. And critting with a smite is insanely powerful. You also get spells like Haste and Protection from Energy, or Banishment, or Hold Monster. Becoming an Oath of Vengeance paladin also gives you Vow of Enmity, so you can have advantage on all of your attacks against an enemy by invoking your channel divinity. 5th level will give you extra attack, and also at 5th level of being a paladin, since Johanna comes in as a motorcycle, that works extra well because you get the feature Faithful Steed, giving you the Find Steed spell added to your spell list for free, and you can cast it once for free, so you have a mount, which is your persona, and it works on so many levels. 6th level will allow you Aura of Protection, giving you an emanation of 10 feet around you, creating an aura allowing you to add your charisma modifier to every saving throw for every person within 10 feet of you. 7th level will give you Relentless Avenger, so when you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, you can reduce their speed to 0, just allowing your party to get another way to get an all-out attack. And just to boost up your radiant damage even more, you can get things like Radiant Strikes. So when you hit a creature with an attack roll using a melee weapon or an unarmed strike, they take an extra 1d8 radiant damage every single time. Once you get all the way to 15th level of being a Vengeance Paladin, you get Soul of Vengeance. So if somebody is under the effect of your Vow of Enmity and they hit or miss with an attack roll, you can actually use your reaction to make a melee attack against them. But once you hit all the way at 20th level of being an Oath of Vengeance Paladin, you get Avenging Angel. So you can actually get a flying speed of 60 feet, and you're so strong you have a frightful aura, just frightening all of your enemies and getting advantage against anyone that's frightened. And just to add on top of everything else you already have, make sure to also grab Summon Celestial so you have another way to summon your persona. Then we've made it through everybody except for the #1 most popular character. And it should be no surprise, it's the hero known as Joker. Now, I've built Joker on this channel before, but that was for the pre-2024 stuff, so I'm happy to build him again. He wound up being thrown into this world of Phantom Thieves purely because he was accused of something that he didn't necessarily do, because he saw this massive jerk doing massive jerk things, and he did what he needed to stop him. That guy turned out to have a bunch of political power and accused him of being a criminal. He wound up getting in a lot of trouble, getting kicked out of school, and he had to transfer schools altogether. He winds up being with the first of the Phantom Thieves along with Ryuji to find their way into the metaverse, and he unlocks the Trickster persona, starting off with Arsene, who can eventually become Satanael, but he has the Fool Arcana and eventually gets the World Arcana. But because he has the unique ability to be able to defeat personas and collect them, he has an ever-expanding list of personas to be able to use. His main weapons include daggers or knives and handguns, but we need to sort out all of that, plus definitely dive into the fact that he can summon basically every persona. And I want to go a massively different route than what I did the first time I made him, because we're still going to go with human. That's kind of a given, but we're going to grab the Magic Initiate feat with being a human, because we need to round out the abilities, considering he can summon any kind of persona to do a wide array of types of damage. So we're going to make sure we can grab from the Cleric spell list, allowing us to get Sacred Flame and Word Radiance to get a bit more radiant focused damage, because we won't have a great source of that otherwise. And we want a healing spell, so we'll grab Cure Wounds. When it comes to a background, I've said this before, you already are paired up with a bunch of similarly ill-fated cast-offs, so Wayfarer is perfect. I was also tempted to go with Criminal because of your history as a criminal, but you're not actually a criminal. You were just kind of painted in that light, and you didn't really deserve it. So I think Wayfarer is better. We can choose a tool proficiency, so we're going to grab Tinkerer's Tools, because you do tinker with tools here and there and make things to use with your going through the palaces. And we also get the Lucky feat, so you have a number of luck points equal to your proficiency bonus, which you can spend to get advantage on a d20 test or force disadvantage for somebody else. The other challenge is that Joker is really good at a lot of different ability scores, because you can level them up throughout the game. However, the main focus of our ability scores need to be on dexterity, because you use a dagger, use a ranged weapon, and you are trying to sneak around these palaces pretty regularly. We also need to focus on charisma, because the other big focus is being able to build relationships with the rest of the Phantom Thieves. So dexterity and charisma all the way. So the starting class that I want to go with is a rogue. This allows us to really heavily focus on using a dagger, and it's going to work even more as we level up throughout rogue. We get expertise in some skills, so we can get expertise in stealth, and we can get expertise in insight. And insight would be really helpful, because then we know what's the right choice for selecting when dealing with the social interactions, to make sure we're able to level up our confidant levels to improve our relationships with everybody. Also, from being a rogue, we get sneak attack, so you get an extra 1d6 of damage you can deal once per turn, and that levels up every 2 levels of rogue, getting an additional 1d6 of damage. The way you can deal this damage is by doing damage with a finesse or ranged weapon, and you have to have either advantage on the roll or one of your allies within 5 feet of the enemy. And this is how you knock down your enemies and get those all-out attacks, or possibly just getting critical strikes. But crits are already built into Dungeons & Dragons. You also get Weapon Mastery at first level of Rogue, so we're going to grab Weapon Mastery with a dagger, giving us the Nick Weapon Mastery property, so you can actually make an extra attack with your offhand as a action thanks to this Nick Weapon Mastery property, so you actually get extra attack without having extra attack, which is kind of nice. And we're also going to grab Weapon Mastery with a pistol, giving us the feature Vex. So whenever you deal damage with a pistol, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. Second level of Rogue, now gives us cunning action. So you can dash, disengage, or hide as a bonus action. 3rd level of rogue gives us a rogue subclass. And this is where we can start actually leaning into collecting personas and also lean into being a Phantom Thief because we can grab the subclass Phantom. Becoming a Phantom Rogue allows you to collect the souls of things you're defeating, just like when you defeat a persona and you're able to collect them for yourself because of the feature Whispers of the Dead. So echoes of those who have died cling to you. When you finish a short or long rest, you can choose one skill or tool proficiency that you lack and gain it, as the entity of the persona that you've defeated actually shares their knowledge with you. And you also get the feature Wails from the Grave. So as you nudge someone closer to the grave, you can channel the power of death to harm someone else as well. Immediately after you deal sneak attack damage to a creature on your turn, you can target a second creature that you can see within 30 feet of the first creature and roll half your sneak attack die, rounded up, and deal that damage to a second creature. And that damage is now necrotic damage. And necrotic damage actually feels even better because Arsene, the first persona that you have, is a curse type persona, and curse damage feels like necrotic damage, so it's perfect. 5th level of rogue gives you cunning strike, so you can sacrifice a number of sneak attack die to do something special, like poison an enemy, or trip them, so that way you can get an all-out attack, or you can withdraw to immediately run away. And in D&D terms, you can run away without provoking an opportunity attack. 5th level of rogue also gives you uncanny dodge, so whenever you get hit with an attack roll, you can take your reaction to take half damage instead. 7th level of rogue gives you evasion, so whenever you have to make a dexterity saving throw to avoid taking damage, you automatically take half damage, and if you succeed, you take 0 damage instead. 7th level also now gives you reliable talent, which is amazing that it gives it to you at 7th level now. So any skill that you have proficiency with, you now can't roll less than a 10 on the dice. And then at 9th level of being a Phantom Rogue, you get tokens of the departed. So this leans even more into collecting personas. So when a life ends in your presence, you're able to snatch a token from the departed soul, snatching up their life essence, and it takes physical form. You can have a number of trinkets equal to your proficiency bonus, which also works in Persona 5 Royal, because the amount of personas you can collect increases as you level up in Persona. And so when you have this trinket on your person, you have advantage on death saving throws and constitution saving throws because your vitality gets enhanced. When you deal sneak attack damage on your turn, you can destroy one of your soul trinkets or your personas and immediately use Wails from the Grave without expending a use of Wails of the Grave. Or the final feature from Tokens of the Departed, as an action, you can destroy one of your soul trinkets or personas, and when you do so, the spirit associated with that trinket has to answer a question. And this feels even more like when you try to collect the persona in the first place and you have to answer questions and stuff. Then going all the way to 11th level of Rogue, you get improved Cunning Strike. So you can actually choose 2 Cunning Strike effects at the same time. Now, I was tempted to keep going with Rogue so you can get that other Cunning Strike to knock an enemy out entirely for another way for an all-out attack, but we have so many ways to do that already that I feel like it's time for that multi-class that I need to do for him. And it's even better to do a multi-class because we went with Rogue first, because they get an extra ability score at this point, so you don't miss out on too much by jumping out before 12th level. So I want to multi-class into Warlock. And this is where the 2024 version of D&D gets to shine a little more, because we get to choose Eldritch Invocations as a Warlock. We've got to choose Pact of the Chain, because we need more ways to summon creatures. And Pact of the Chain allows you to cast the spell Find Familiar without expending a spell slot, and you have a whole wide variety of creatures to be able to summon. So you have more options for a persona that you're summoning into the battlefield. Like you can have an imp, which definitely appears in the game. You can have a pseudo-dragon, you can have all sorts of stuff. But we also want to focus on our physical attacking abilities. And after 2024 edition of D&D, you can have multiple packs. So you can have Pact of the Blade as well. So as you level up in Warlock, you can make sure to level up your Pact of the Blade and your Pact of the Chain stuff simultaneously. So you can grab Eldritch Smite and Thirsting Blade for an extra attack and another way to boost up your damage on top of your sneak attack damage. You can boost up the Summoned Companion with investment of the Chain Master, allowing you to boost up your familiar that you're summoning into existence. And because in Persona 5 Royal you have that grappling hook thing, I wanted to add something there as well with the Eldritch Invocation, Otherworldly Leap. It allows you to cast the jump spell on yourself for free without expending a spell slot, and it's another way for you to leap to hide surfaces. When you're grabbing spells from Warlock stuff, you can grab Eldritch Blast to have another way to fire off your pistol. You want to deal more necrotic damage with Arsene with Toll the Dead. You want another way for an all-out attack with Hold Person, and then you just want as many summoning spells as you can get. So grab Summon Fae to summon a more fairy type creature, summon Shadow Spawn, summon Undead, Spirit of Death, summon Aberration, summon Greater Demon, and that covers the majority of them. But part of the reason I wanted to get all the way to 9th level of Warlock is that gets you access to 5th level spells. So you need to grab Hold Monster for another all-out attack, but most importantly, you need the spell Planar Binding. This allows you to bind a celestial, elemental, fae, or fiend to your service. It's another way for you to collect a persona of basically any type that appears in the game. It traps them and binds them to your commands. It is absolutely perfect and spot on for the character, so I could not avoid grabbing it. But going back through the basic features of Warlock, at 3rd level of Warlock you get to choose a Warlock subclass. And because you have the Fool Arcana and the first persona you get is a Trickster, I think the best Trickster type of subclass you can have as a Warlock is an Archfey Patron. Archfey Patrons will automatically give you spells like Fairy Fire and Misty Step and Blink, as well as Dominate Beast and Dominate Person, which are even more ways for you to control personas. And then for sneaking around, you can also grab Greater Invisibility. And even if you want a way to put a persona to sleep, it also grants you the spell Sleep. But for another way to use your grappling hook, you have the access to Steps of the Fae. So you can cast Misty Step without expending a spell slot a number of times equal to your Charisma modifier. And you get additional benefits when you do this. So immediately after you teleport, you or one creature you can see can gain 1d10 temporary hit points, or you can get Taunting Step to force a creature to have disadvantage on their attack rolls. At 6th level of being an Archfey Warlock, you get Misty Escape, so you can now take Misty Step as a reaction in response to taking damage. And when you teleport, you have new options for your Steps of the Fae, allowing you to use Disappearing Step to make yourself invisible, or Dreadful Step to inflict 2d10 psychic damage. You can take Warlock all the way to 9th level to get Contact Patron, and frankly, Contact Patron might be the way that you talk to Igor in the game, just trying to incorporate as many ways to relate it to the game as possible. But that's all 10 playable characters from Persona 5 Royal as playable characters in Dungeons & Dragons. I know I sped through them as best I could, but this is a heck of a lot to record. My voice is absolutely shot. I really appreciate GMD for chiming in and helping me out, especially because it saved my voice from talking through Akechi and trying to figure him out in the first place. I absolutely love Persona 5 Royal. It's probably in my top 3 favorite games of all time. Probably number 2, but if you want to guess what number 1 is, let me know in the comments. And if you want access to the character sheet for all of these builds, including the full breakdown of all the ability scores and all the spells that I kind of skipped over, they'll be up on my Patreon for anybody to access, and it really helps support this channel. If you made it all the way to the end of this insanely long video, let me know by hitting that like button, and you can also let me know in the comments which character is actually your favorite from Persona 5 Royal. But I'll be here helping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to play any character from Persona 5 Royal as a playable character in your next Dungeons & Dragons session.